One of the things that I do that has impacted me, when I go into a church, and I've been doing this for 20 years, and I was kind of like Bill on the whole prophetic thing, you know, when there was a prophet named Laddie McDonough many, many years ago. This was back in late 70s. And Laddie would go to all of these places, and he was a famous prophet. And so he came to the church where we're at, and it's just like I wanted to have that shirt that Bill had, you know, speak to me, speak to me, speak to me. And it was the whole congregation. It was everybody wanted to have a word from God. People were so desperate to be validated by God speaking to them through a prophet. And I was amazed that you watch the people, you have all of these people that are getting these prophetic words, and you just see them crying, they're overwhelmed, that God would take time out of his busy schedule and come and talk to them and give them such personal, powerful words. But those were not the people that I watched. The people that I watched were those that did not get the prophetic words. And I wondered, what is going through their minds? What are they processing? Are they feeling a sense of rejection? Are they feeling a sense that God doesn't care for them? God never recognizes me. Nobody ever sees me. What are they going through? And that is the sort of things that we have to look at. William Blake, the English mystic, said these words: there are visible worlds and there are invisible worlds, and in between there are doors. The challenge of the writer is to find the doors. And if you find the doors between the visible world and the invisible world, you will have a wealth of material to write. Let me give you a Paul Simon song. I'm a huge Paul Simon fan. And that dates me a little bit. Yes, I'm an old man. But Paul Simon had this song. It was really one of his worst-selling albums. But listen to the words of this. If you want to write a song about the moon, walk along the craters of the afternoon. When the shadows are deep and the light is alien, and gravity leaps like a knife off the pavement, and you want to write a song about the moon, you want to write a spiritual tune. Presto, song about the moon. If you want to write a song about the heart, think about the moon before you start, because the heart will show you how, like a dog in the moonlight, and the heart can explode like a pistol on a June night. So if you want to write a song about the heart and it's ever longing for a counterpart, write a song about the moon. T.S. Eliot, and I have to admit, I am not a huge fan. In fact, I am not a fan of poetry. I am a very illiterate person, and poetry's never been my gig. But someone once gave me a poem by T.S. Eliot, and it kind of revolutionized my thinking about poetry. So I do have one poetry book in my library, which is the collected works of T.S. Eliot. But listen to this. Between the idea and the reality, between the motion and the act, falls the shadow, for thine is the kingdom. Between the conception and the creation, between the emotion and the response, falls the shadow. And what T.S. Eliot is trying to say, between the idea and the concept that you receive as pure revelation, before that can be developed into a word that you preach, a word that you write, you have to walk in the shadow. That word has to be tested. That word has to be marketed in your own life. You have to walk through experiences that become the resources to take the word and make it a creation. And most writers are afraid of the shadows. They're afraid of the dark. And therefore their writing is pristine, it's clean, but it's not honest. And I have found that the most effective books are books that are written by those who are willing to be vulnerable and honest. And so why walk through experiences? Why have your doubts? Why not express your doubts, your frustrations? I'm walking right now through what is probably my third defining moment in my life. Most of you probably don't know my story, but I was a missionary in Mozambique from 1972 to 1976 before anybody really knew about Mozambique. And during that time, the communists had taken over. I was arrested, interrogated for 8 hours, and put in prison for 10 months. And that became a transition into something I had never, ever experienced before. And God had given us this unbelievable ministry in Mozambique. We were working with the Portuguese Department of Health. We were running this street drug rehab. The top drug addicts from the country were getting saved. And I'm 28 years old. I'm thinking, wow, this ministry, this is easy. This is like, wow, this is just like unbelievable. I'm a young guy. I don't know anything. I can barely speak Portuguese, but God opens up the door with the Portuguese government. I'm working with the Secretary of Health. We had the first street meeting in the history of Mozambique in the town. We're bringing this Jesus people from South Africa, and we got music groups, and we got people witnessing and people getting saved, and it's just like unbelievable. And like that, it is all taken away. And the center's shut down. The kids are running for their lives. My wife's on the outside with the 3 kids, and I'm in a prison cell, an A block, room number 6, with 2 other prisoners, asking the question, why, God, have you done this? And it was the questions in the dark night of my soul that I discovered things that I could not have discovered any other way. And sometimes the truth that God gives us in our head has to be processed in our heart. And so we get a revelation and we think, oh, this should be a book. But it cannot be a book until it's become a revelation that has been experienced in your life. My second defining moment, I woke up one day and found out that all 3 of my kids were involved in drugs. And I had worked with drug addicts my whole life, but I was out preaching, pastoring, and doing, what these guys have to do, and one day woke up, and my daughter's going to jail, my kids are in trouble, and I'm crying out to God again, and I'm saying, I helped other parents get their kids off drugs. Where the hell are you at? And why aren't you taking care of my life? Why aren't you there? And why is this going on? And I went through rehab, I went through prayer counseling, I went through deliverance, I looked up Bible verses, I'm doing everything I possibly could, and I could not find an answer. I felt like shame and guilt when I went to church, and I felt like shame and guilt when I didn't go to church, until eventually I stopped going to church and was out of ministry for 7 years. But it became a defining moment in my life. And it was in that moment where I understood the truths that are in ancient language of Eden. Because I had been raised in the concept that God accepts us for what we do and not for who we are. I've been trained in a Bible college where we were told you cannot let anybody see your weaknesses. You have to be a person of strength. You have to project strength. I was told that knowledge is power, and he who has the most knowledge has the most power. And so I read books, and I gathered knowledge, and I gathered information. I was afraid of anybody who had more knowledge than I did. And in the end, I understood that all my concepts of God were all screwed up, that all my theology was a total mess, that none of this stuff was working for me in what I was working through. And in the end, I woke up one morning in my living room with God speaking to me His love in ways that I've never known. My whole life, I heard what I called the sounds of shame. If I stopped, I would hear, you're not a very good husband. You're not a very good parent. You're not a very good preacher. If I was out there preaching, I'd feel guilty because I wasn't at home. If I was home, I'd feel guilty that I wasn't out preaching. And the sounds were always, always there. I could not turn it off. I'd have Christian music going on. I'd have to have other noise to drown out that sound. And I woke up that morning with Jesus whispering sweet nothings in my ear like I had never heard before. And I never, ever heard those sounds again. But it became a defining moment. I could not have gotten to that point unless I walked through that. And now hopefully this is the last defining moment because I'm a very old guy and I don't have time for many more of these moments. But my wife was diagnosed with 4th-stage breast cancer 8 years ago. And we were getting ready to go through, and this has nothing to do with writing, only in this point, is that our writing comes out of our experience. Our best writing, our most powerful words, the words that I speak today come out of the dark night of the soul. They come out of the experiences. God has given me language based upon my experience. And so Mickey we were going to go away on vacation, come back. She was going to do radical mastectomy, chemo, and all of that stuff. And while we were on vacation, she got a word from the Lord. And God told her that whatever you do, it's okay with me. But if you go the non-medical route, there will be things that you will learn that you couldn't have learned any other way. And that was the decision that she made, much to my consternation. And even though I believed in healing, it was just like, it was very fearful for me. And Mickey has not wavered one iota in 9 years. And has never, ever doubted it, have never allowed cancer to be the defining moment of her life. But in the last 3 years, the tumor has quadrupled. 4 or 5 times during the week, she'll be up in the middle of the night with pain. And we talk about death and dying and eternity. When we're in our 20s, you don't talk about death, dying, and eternity. But when you're reaching your 60s, and you're having to take tests that you didn't have to take when you're in your 20s, and your body's being violated by doctors, and but in the middle of it, it becomes a defining moment in our life. Do you trust God when what you believe for does not seem like it is happening? And God is showing us things that we've never seen before. I told God once, I says, I'm not interested in writing any more books. I don't want any more defining moments in my life. I don't want any more dark nights of the soul. I will be happy to publish other people and let them have their dark night of the soul. Let them go through their defining moments, and I'll just live out the rest of my life being a helpful guy that gets their books published. But he has chosen not to hear that prayer. And but that's what it's all about, folks. This is about writing about our journeys. Good books are journey books. They're writing about our doubts and our fears. They're writing about our questions. They're writing about how our concepts are being changed. They're writing about how God is changing the environment around us. They're writing about the things that we see in our world. And it is those kind of writings where words are born. The language that I speak is not the language that I spoke when I was 20 years old.